Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Naturia Yugioh deck profile for March 2022. With the release of Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1, I've definitely wanted to update the Naturia deck. We have a bunch of cards reprinted, so it's a lot more easy for people to gain access to the different cards that you need for the Naturia deck, including Naturia Bamboo Shoot and Naturia Cherry. It's a really fun deck. It's been one of my favorites for years now. It's definitely one that got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Just with the overall playstyle, being able to go into many different synchros, fusions, and a bunch of other lockdown plays using the main deck Naturia monsters. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. For the Naturia monsters, we are running 3 Naturia Bamboo Shoot. I always tilted back and forth between how many copies of Bamboo Shoot I wanted to run in the deck, but I'm back at 3. It just really helps to lock down a lot of different decks. Well, you control this face-up card that was Tribute Summon. By tributing 1 Naturia monster, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards. So it doesn't even start a chain. It just activates. It just takes effect as soon as this card hits the field. So your opponent really can't chain anything to it in response. No torrential, no bottomless, no any other kind of card unless they just try and stop the summon before this card even hits the field. And taking away spells and traps definitely will shut down your opponent immensely unless they rely on, let's say some monster effects or anything like that. They really don't have much aside from just summoning out a monster and then being able to either get rid of the Bamboo Shoot on the field or at least attack over it, which we have a lot of other cards to at least defend against that playstyle if they try and work around not being able to use spell or traps. I also run 3 Naturia Cliff. Naturia Cliff is good. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 level 4 lower Naturia monster from your deck and face up attack position. So you can just go Naturia Cliff into Naturia Cliff and go through all 3 of your cliffs for the special summon and then 1 final Naturia monster. It does say when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, so it does miss timing if you were to use Cliff for a synchro summon, so bear that in mind with this card. It's mostly just here for the destruction play, more of a defensive lineup using Cliff, but still a definite 3 of. And I also run 3 Naturia Pumpkin. When this card is normal summon, if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon 1 Naturia monster from your hand. There's no restriction to what you can summon with Pumpkin. As long as your opponent has that monster, you can even summon out Pumpkin, and I don't know why you would, but you can summon out Bamboo Shoot, giving you those 2 monsters to at least go for a link summon. But my favorite play is to use Pumpkin with any of the tuner monsters, because depending on what tuner you can have full access to your entire extra deck for these synchros or any of your link 2 plays still, even if you don't have a tuner. And for the last of the 3 ofs for the Naturia monsters, 3 Naturia Cherries, another fresh reprint off of the newest set. When this card is sent from your field to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can special summon up to 2 Naturia Cherries from your deck and face down defense position. It's more of a defensive playstyle, losing 1 Cherries to get 2 on the field face down, then gives you resources for either your extra deck plays, being a level 1 tuner. Much variety comes into it. I'd say the biggest weakness with Naturia Cherries is just when you open up 2, because then you can only get the 1 special summon, since it does say special summon from the deck. But if you open up Cherries as the additional play, you can always go Pumpkin into Cherries, and right then and there is a level 5 Naturia Beast play. With the lower numbers for the Naturias, we're running 2 Naturia Cosmo Beat. With this card, when your opponent normal summons or sets a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. This is just a quicker way to gain access to the Bamboo Shoot play, or even just a monster on the field for you to use for the following turn, unless your opponent, opts to destroy this card. When you special summon Cosmo Beat on your opponent's turn, then you can just follow up with your turn by tributing the Cosmo Beat for a Bamboo Shoot, shutting down once again any of your opponent's spell or trap card plays. That and easy, and all your opponent has to do is open up the play for that. I also like Cosmo Beat because it's a level 2 tuner, meaning you can use it with Pumpkin to then special summon out with Pumpkin to then go into Naturia Barkion or any of your other level 6 synchros, which I'll show at the end with the extra deck. I also run 2 Naturia Antjaw. When your opponent special summons a monster, you can special summon 1 level 3 or lower Naturia monster from your deck. So the more your opponent summons a monster with a special summon, you just gain more and more access to your different Naturias. So you can summon out Antjaw, and then if your opponent summons out a monster, you can summon out Naturia Cherries. If your opponent is going to continue the summon, you can at least try and fill up your board with many different Naturia monsters. Try and refrain from special summoning out multiple Cherries, unless one of the Cherries is obviously in your hand. Go for all the lower level Naturias you may want to summon out, because then either you just build up that wall for your opponent to stop, and then you can use them for resources or a block against your opponent's attacks that turn. I also run 2 Naturia Butterfly. Once per turn, when your opponent monster declares an attack, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard and negate that attack. So along with that wall that I specified for Yugioh, summoning out Butterfly would definitely be a first target card, because then you just get that monster on the field, and you have 1 negate against an attack your opponent may try to use against you. And for some of the 1-ofs for the Naturia monsters, I run 1 Naturia Fruitfly, 1 Naturia Dragonfly, and 1 Naturia Marin. Marin is a recycle card. When it's normal summon, you can send 1 Naturia from your deck to the graveyard, and once per turn, you can target 2 in your graveyard that are Naturias, and shuffle those targets into the deck to draw 1 card. A great way to recycle your cherries if you do open up the 2, going through the 2 by the 1 special summon, and if you have the other one in your hand, at least then you can summon it onto the field, and then have the refreshed cherries back in the deck to use. Dragonfly is great with Naturia Sacred Tree, tagging out a plant monster to summon out an insect monster, being Dragonfly. If your opponent has high attack monsters, it gains 200 attack for each Naturia in your graveyard. It cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that has 2,000 or more attack, so you just play that defensive play with this card to go up against your opponent. And with Naturia Fruitfly, this card is all face-up monsters your opponent control lose 300 attack and defense for each face-up Naturia monster you control, and once per turn you can select 1 face-up monster your opponent controls with 0 defense and take control of it until the end phase. So the only thing this card won't work at, sadly, is link monsters, but once again, going back to the Yugioh special summon, Marin and Fruitfly are both ones that you can summon out using the Yugioh along with the Butterfly, and the more you summon and the more you build up with Fruitfly, the lower your opponent's monster's attack will be, so it'll be even that more difficult to get over your wall of Naturias. And that is it for the monsters. I wanted to stick to as pure of a Naturia lineup as I could, with the spell lineup being rather small. It's more of a focus on the traps for defending the Naturia monsters you get out onto the field. But for the spells, I run 2 Foolish Burial Goods. This is to send Sacred Tree to the graveyard. With this, when it's in the graveyard and sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Naturia card from your deck to your hand, except for Sacred Tree. So just a faster way to grab any of the Naturias you may need for your play that turn. And also for the 1-ofs, 1 Monster Reborn, special summoning resources back to the field to use, 1 Call by the Grave, shutting down your opponent's own graveyard plays, the 1 Pot of Avarice for recycling, just like Naturia Marin, all of your different cards, Harpy's Feather Duster, because sometimes the Solemn back row could be the biggest weakness to any of your extra deck synchro plays, or just summoning out Naturia Bamboo Shoot. And lastly for the spells, the 1 Miracle Synchro Fusion. One of my favorites is after you make use of Beast and Barkion, if your opponent gets around them, you at least have the banish play to then summon out your Naturia Exterio to the field. A card that is just as powerful, just a little more difficult to get out, but being able to banish from the graveyard with cards like Miracle Synchro Fusion helps very much so. And then if you don't have the play to go to, you can just keep it set on the field. If your opponent destroys it, you get to draw a card. And that is it for the spells. Moving on now to the traps. One of the best traps in the deck is Naturia Sacred Tree. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you add 1 Naturia card from your deck to your hand, except for Sacred Tree. You can only use one of the following effects of Sacred Tree once per turn, and only once that turn. You can tribute 1 Earth Insect type monster to special summon 1 level 4 lower Earth Plant type monster from your deck, or vice versa, being able to tribute the plant monster to then special summon a level 4 lower Earth Insect type monster. So you have a good variety of plants and insect monsters. I'd say the only ones that you can't really go for the target is Bamboo Shoot and Cliff, but being able to go back and forth and really makes use of the 1-ofs that we run in the deck as well with Sacred Tree, because you can have your plant monster, let's say Cosmobeat, and then just use Sacred Tree to tag out into the more appropriate insect type monster, whether it be for the play you want to go for, and vice versa, attributing the insect monster to then go for, let's say, the more defensive play style for any of your plant Naturia monsters. And then I also run the 3 Crackdown. More ways to protect Bamboo Shoot. Crackdown just takes your opponent's monster before it can be used as an attempt to get over Naturia Bamboo Shoot. I like 3 of it because then you can also potentially use that monster once you take it as a resource for any of the pretty generic extra deck monsters we run. And lastly, for more protection, the 3 Solemn Strike and the 3 Solemn Judgment. You really don't use life points for much in this deck, so these cards come in handy just for the added wall for protecting this card. Once you get this card out, like I said, spell and traps are pretty much done for your opponent, and with these cards you can make it sure that you are not going to have a problem with any of the monsters your opponent may try to use against your Naturia Bamboo Shoots. And that is it For the main deck, we'll now move on to the extra deck. For the Naturia Synchros, I run the 1 Naturia Landoise, the 1 Barkion, and the 1 Beast. If you didn't want to run Landoise, you can always put in an additional Beast or Barkion. It's player preference with that point there. Landoise is a little more difficult to use in the deck because it does require a spell to discard off of the Landoise to stop a monster effect, but it does destroy that monster as well. Barkion and Beasts, much more resourceful. At level 5 and 6 Synchro, Barkion stops traps by banishing cards from your graveyard, and Beast stops spells by milling the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So all the better with both of these. You can even get lucky sometimes with Naturia Beast, sending the Sacred Tree, getting you an additional search off of what you sent to the graveyard. For some other Synchros, I also run 1 Queen of Thorns and 1 Yugioh Guardian. Queen of Thorns needs a non-tuner plant type monster, so with that, your best play with this would be the Pumpkin and Cosmo Beat to summon it out, and Yugioh Guardian just needs an Earth Tuner, which is the majority of the tuners we were running in this deck to begin with. For more of the generic Synchro monsters, I also run 1 Black Rose Dragon and 1 Leo, the Keeper of the Sacred Tree. If you don't want to run Leo, Baron de Fleur is also an option in the deck. I just wanted to stick with Leo. It's more of a Naturia-themed type of Synchro monster, but once again, if you do have Baron de Fleur, you could always run that as an additional level 10 in the deck. And for the Link monsters, I run the 1 Asa the Earth Charmer removable, the 1 Link Karibo. This helps if you have the 2 Cherry play. I'd feel a lot safer with the Cherries to then just link summon into 1 Link Karibo for that, than to risk just the 1 special summon of a single Cherry from the deck to the field. And I also run the 1 Cross Sheep with all the different other options, including Synchro, Xyz, and Fusion in this deck. This pops up a lot more than I thought I would see in this deck to use. And then 1 Nightmare Cerberus for monster destruction. Another difficult thing to get around in this deck since Bamboo Shoot does shut down a good number of spell and traps. And the 1 Apollosa is the last Link 4 option for stopping monster effects for more of the lockdown of the deck. And then for the Xyz monsters, I run 1 Malaya of the Trees and 1 Gallant Granite. Gallant Granite just needs 2 level 4 monsters to make it, so it can ideally be the Pumpkin summoning out another Pumpkin play, and then you can overlay the 2, and with the Detach of 1, set up a Naturia Cliff from your hand onto the field, or even special summoning the 1 by adding it from your deck to your hand instead. I like summoning it from the hand because normally I don't like to use the Cliff for the overlay, so if you have the 2 Pumpkins to overlay, you can at least then just set the Cliff up for another destruction play with Gallant Granite. And Malaya of the Trees just helps with the level 3 monsters that we do run, being able to overlay them and then set up more of the plant monsters for our plays. And then lastly, the 1 Exterio with a Banish from your graveyard for 1 and a Send from the top of your deck for the other. This card comes in handy for stopping either spell or trap. So you have Bamboo Shoot, Beast, Barkion. There's not going to be a lot your opponent's going to be able to do against this deck with all the lockdown it can provide. And then as for some of the go-to additional plays in the deck, depending on what you open up with your Naturia Pumpkin, if you go for the normal summon, special summon, you have a wide variety of special summonings depending on the additional monster you may have added from your hand. With the search, depending on what you open up, if you summon out your Naturia Pumpkin, and special summoning either one in that order, whether it be Cherries, Cosmo Beat, or Naturia Butterfly, you have access to all 3 of the tuners that I spoke of before with these cards to summon out using it. If you go for the 2 Pumpkins, then you either have a Link 2 option or even the overlay of your Gallant Granite that I spoke of before as well. If you have the Naturia Cherries defense, if your Cherries gets destroyed and you have the 2 special summoned out onto the field, if your opponent leaves these 2 Cherries intact for you to use that are flip face down, you can then following turn either use 1 of the Cherries to summon out your Naturia Bamboo Shoot to the field. If your opponent, let's say, effect veilers or somehow negates the effect by not using a spell or trap, you can at least then use the remaining Cherry on the field to synchro with the Bamboo Shoot into a much safer Barkion on the field, which has higher attack power, and its effect won't be negated, obviously, also. The final play that I'm a big fan of is the option with your 2 Cherries once again, but if you open up the Pumpkin, you can then go into the level 5 play with your Naturia Beast, and if you want to continue the play, if you open up the Miracle Synchro Fusion, going into one more final Synchro play with the Naturia Barkion. If you have additional monsters to summon out with this play, like if you had the 1 additional, let's say Cosmo Beat for that setup, then ideally you could also go for the Link 2 play, setting up your Cross Sheep with the 2 on the field. Summoning out the Cross Sheep will give you the additional monster setup needing it, and then also being able to use your Miracle Synchro Fusion to then banish your Barkion and Beast to summon out your Exterio to the field. And since you summoned out a fusion monster to where your Cross Sheep is summoned, you special summon a level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard using that resource that was used as the 1 pumpkin onto the field to summon out, giving you that additional monster resource to use. And then lastly, just with the pumpkin setup again, you have the pumpkin and Cosmo Beat to rely on for going into the play to use with your Queen of Thorns. These 2 monsters requiring the plants, and the pumpkin is used for either the Queen of Thorns or the Goyo Guardian. If you went second and you just want to take your opponent's resource, you can use the Goyo. But going for it first, I definitely recommend Queen of Thorns because each player must pay 1,000 life points to normal or special summon a non-plant type monster from their hand. So more resources for that. Special summon stops a lot your opponent may have for that setup. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy. Like I said, Naturias are one of my favorites, and I always love updating the deck. If not a couple times a year, I always like to at least do it once a year since I have started up the channel. So can't wait to continue updating this deck. And maybe one day we'll see more support. Who knows? Maybe the Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 releasing Naturia support was an added hint to us getting additional support in the near future. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.